big bang? When's the mobility big bang?
Automotive started to become a VC.
Is that still going on?
It's such a no-brainer to switch to electric cars.
You are not moving fast enough.
Welcome to the show. Okay, this is going to be a long one.
Already from whiskey sour here.
It's about getting the data into the
I would form like a Beatles formation.
Or a fascination with cars.
We talked with a colleague from Bulgaria. He had a food startup before creating a software as a service company for EV charging. I think in your case, but correct me if I'm wrong, many years back you started with navigation, right?
That's true.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, the first company that we did with a couple of friends and joined the company after they founded, maybe half a year later, was a digital mapping company back in 2000, 2000. And that
was 8 years before the iPhone, I guess, right?
Yeah, right, okay. Right. Yeah, the very first product we had in mind was a consumer product called Zoomland. And the company actually developed a technology, a real-time map renderer. So maps actually, digital maps on the one hand have the digital map data, and then there are programs who making it visible, the renderer. And
right.
So this company, Gate 5, actually developed this renderer who could in real time zoom from outer space on any building in Berlin, and we could mark every of the 580,000 buildings and leave messages and share with buddy lists through text gateways and so on. So pretty advanced stuff, but way too early. No, but over years we found the way, and then it became navigation, and then with 2004-5ish, when mobile navigation with TomTom and so on became so popular, we had the right product at the right time, and then this old Finnish mother Nokia decided to build GPS in every phone. And at the time, those who can remember, Nokia built 400 million phones per year.
Right.
And they said, if we put GPS in every phone, we better own a mapping company. And they bought us.
Nice. But how do you come up with the idea to create a mapping company in the 90s, end of the 90s?
I mean, as said, I'm not a founder. I'm a founding generation because I was with the company very early on. So
right.
The story is quickly told, and it's really interesting because at the time there was a project by Berlin. A multimedia agency for Deutsche Telekom called TerraVision. And TerraVision was this rendering technology that actually showed at the day when Deutsche Telekom went public a real-time animated flight from outer space into Frankfurt Stock Exchange over to New York, and that was displayed all over the place. So then the project was over, and then the team got divided in two groups, more or less, or the developers, and one part of the developers actually left to the US and founded a company called Keyhole, and the other one founded Gate 5. So, and both came from this digital mapping type of. It was pretty nerdy stuff at that time, right? I mean, and come on, it was not on mobile phones, definitely not, right? It was big Sun Micro machines. And Keyhole actually then got acquired by Google and was the foundation for Google Maps.
Right.
And so our company and Google Maps somehow have the same grandmother.
But if you say the core device for the application was what did you say? Sun
Microsystem.
Sun Microsystem.
Yeah, it was. I mean, at that time. And we all remember that. I hope so.
Yeah, that was the computer.
That was the computer. You had a server rack, and I remember in 2002 we had a presentation to Daimler of what we did, and everything usually worked perfectly fine, and it did not work in front of the Daimler Vorstand, the C-level person, and we couldn't figure out. And the secret was that the cleaning woman actually had pulled the plug of our server rack in the headquarters.
There was always the stories.
Hey, yeah, and many people cannot remember that that was the times before cloud computing.
Interesting. But the core use case then was to basically have a map that navigates you from A to B on a stationary device, right?
I would say at the time there was no core use case.
Okay.
At that time,
It was more like a piece of technology then.
Yeah,
like,
I
this
mean,
is cool.
you know, it's exactly. I mean, now we are 20 years more advanced with company building, but the term product market fit, we didn't know it. I mean, at that time, it was, as I said, it was a pretty nerdy project when it started. Then it was the end of the first bubble, so it was relatively easy to find money. And these guys found money, and with the money they said, okay, what can we do with this awesome technology? But let's first focus on technology. And some of the money definitely was invested into huge breakfast buffets and table tennis. And
Yeah, worse things to do with the money.
Slowly, I mean, I'm a business guy, and at the time, then one of the original investors joined as a CEO, ex-BCG guy, and then we started to build out the first product concepts and ideas. And the original idea had nothing to do with routing and navigation. It was a digital map, and using a digital map, if you want, so that was really very early as a kind of a visual data interface, right? How can I visualize geographical data and connect them with real-time information? So I want to leave a message for my body and say, hey, I'm actually in the third courtyard, like here, in the fourth floor, and I send you a text message with the location, exactly what you know today from Google Maps, exactly how you use it at the time, but at the time where phones actually had text message, and it was 2G or 2.5G maximum. There were no mobile browsers, etc., and it all was web-based, of course. I mean, yeah, it was.
I'm curious. You all raised money at the end of the crisis or the dot-com bubble. How did you last until 2004, 2005?
I can tell you, in 2004-5, there were some investors who only invited us for pitching because they told us in the pitch, oh, no, we're not interested to invest. We just want to understand, how did you survive?
That's what I'm curious. How
That's a nice consulting product.
Yeah, rumor has it. Yeah, I mean, the founders at the time, I think they raised late enough to take enough money.
Okay.
And early enough to still get it. Because right after the bubble exploded and there was no money anymore. But especially in Germany, I can remember there was right after I graduated from university in the first bubble, many of these first-time startups or early startups took too little money, right? And the VCs at the time were not very experienced. The funds were not big. So they took 500,000, 600,000, and then they bought a handful of company cars and had a good party, a launch party, and then the money was gone, right? And that was better. So we had substantial funding for the time, and the team was not so big. But yeah, I mean, actually for me, I came from a corporate background. I did a traineeship with Axel Springer, the media company, and then I worked for Sat1, this TV company, and so on. And then I joined them. It was actually like a 7-year MBA type of class, right? I mean, we went through all phases of building a technical company and succeed. Still at the end, because I mean, after we were almost running out of money, or while we were almost running out of money, 9/11 happened, right? And after 9/11, there was definitely no money anymore. So, I mean, quite honestly, and it's interesting that you're asking that, because at the moment I'm talking a lot about that with friends and fellow entrepreneurs. It's my third company I'm running right now, and it's my third crisis, right? So the first one was 9/11, that was with the first company. Second one was financial crisis, that was the second one, and now we have Corona with the third company. And what you learn is that if the crisis affects you, right, there's only one way to survive. First of all, you must not lose any time. There is not a minute you can lose, and you have to cut costs, right? Because the only thing that counts in a period like that is surviving, liquidity to the maximum,
Right.
and then try to find a way to continue to build your product, or if you're smart or have the opportunity to you rebuild the company, because sometimes that is a good time also to go in hibernation mode and say, okay, we're changing things that we couldn't change before. And then hopefully you can survive. And when the crisis is over and you can breathe again, then you go back to growth.
Right. I was wondering, what was the startup scene here in Berlin like 20 years back?
Not existing.
Not existing.
Say, like, how did you, as someone working in the corporate space, what made you be like, yeah, I'm going to join these guys who are building this thing that doesn't really have a audience, or like what was
Quite
in your
honestly,
mind?
when I joined them, I did not really understand what they were about to build. I mean, I checked the team and I had my interviews and I said, okay, serious guys, it was not these 21-year-old guys. We do a cyberspace where we meet with avatars and things like that. Quite popular at the time.
AOL, Messenger.
All of that, chow.com, I mean, unbelievable. But no, I mean, the funny answer is that I said, okay, let's try the internet before it's over again. Right? It was a little bit, a couple of, I mean, I'm not a digital native, but of course, I mean, I grew up with the early PCs and mobile phones and so on and so forth. But I was never so tech savvy. But a couple of my classmates, etc., ended up in the first internet bubble, or in the first wave, if you want so. And some of them did quite well, and others went belly up. So that was the story, and it was all over the place. I mean, it was this time where you switched on telly in the morning, and stock market has quadrupled again, right? And we had companies like EMTV, right? It came out of the blue, and they bought just by the money they rose at the market. Formula One, they had all the James Bond license rights, the Beatles songs, and so on, printing money out of the blue, and this all collapsed. No, but it was, for me, it was a time where I thought, okay, I'm young enough to fail financially, right? I mean, that is the point. I mean, I was in my late 20s, 29, but it was okay. And I said, okay, come on, I want to try that.
Right. Interesting. And after Gate 5, was it clear, well, now that you understood the game, you have to continue, creating a new company? Or was it kind of a longer process for founding the next one?
So it was a longer process because, first of all, as said, the company got acquired by Nokia in 2006, and after a 7-year roller coaster, I think we were all quite relieved that startup part was over. Course. I mean, right at the time when we sold, I think because after 6 years really fighting hard and trying, and then suddenly having a product that sold extremely well, I think there was a short time where we were not sure to sell, because we thought, okay, we might going to go IPO and things like that. In this hype, when navigation exploded, and we were one of the first ones, and I traveled on a bi-monthly base to Asia, Taiwan, Korea, China, Hong Kong, and so on, Xiamen, and we sold licenses like every day. I mean, and 40, 50,000 in one order, right? And that was, I don't know, at the time, $20 per license or something like that. So it was a good time. And before we hadn't had revenues, right? So, but of course, it is what it is. It's a roller coaster. And then we joined Nokia. And Nokia, I mean, I only can recommend following this Facebook group Beyond Nokia. It's unbelievable. It was a big family. And the onboarding process was amazing. And we all felt immediately very well in this company. and we had this great opportunity. I mean, first of all, our at that time CEO is a very strong leader figure, and he took this role. Let's build this big, right, with a very global view. Nokia gave us the funds. There was a leadership team in Nokia who really believed into that. So there was a good time, and there was this usual exit things like payout and earnout and
you got to put your time in.
Exactly.
They weren't going to
some call it golden handcuffs. Exactly. No, but that's why I'm telling this second, because I mean actually we all like to work there, right?
Which is quite rare, like for a small startup company
absolutely.
to be acquired.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, this is family.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, I can talk hours about that. What makes an exit successful and how to integrate. And one of the advantages with Nokia at the time was that if a company really believes into a topic because they think strategically this is super important for us, and they don't have this topic yet in-house, and they acquire a company that is in our size, we're 75 people at the time, 75 people, and they put the funds in and don't start with, okay, first you need to go profitable, then we can talk about budget, etc. I mean, that happened to me in another occasion. And you have a good leadership team and they get along, then it's great. And no one in Nokia really understood what we knew. They only knew that it's important for us, and so it was not that there was any hierarchical issues like, and now I tell you how to run your business, right? Of course, there were a lot of discussions and conflicts, etc., and many of them I can't remember anymore. And anyhow, I was out of town. I was in Hong Kong running the licensing business, but no, it was good. And then I came back in 2008 and. Before Nokia had a little automotive angle, because for a while they built these black boxes for telematics, and but that was it. And there's this other story that at the time when Nokia was so extremely successful and powerful, it happened that the head of product of Mercedes S-Class called the head of Nokia sales and say, hey, we have this issue here with the Bluetooth protocol and your Series 60 is not properly connecting. Couldn't we do something there? And Nokia was more like, okay, let's have a break. How many cars of your S-Class you're selling per year? Is it 8,000, 9,000? Do you know that I'm producing 8,000 phones per second per day? You really think I will change anything? So there was this typical attitude of I'm ruling the world, right? So, and that means that there also was the relationship with the automotive industry was simply not existing. So, but now Nokia had navigation, and the tier ones and the car makers starting to call and say, hey, we saw you bought this company, and I mean, every of our drivers has a Nokia phone, and if you bring now navigation in our cars, what does it mean? And is this something where we should talk about, etc. So, but no one took these calls because it was uncommon. So I started to build the first automotive, if you want so, department in Nokia Maps in 2008, and worked on a couple of initiatives, CE4A, Consumer Electronics for Automotive, which was founded by Daimler and BMW and Volvo, etc. So there were these first initiatives, right? And that's what I then did. And end of 2009, early 2010, I said, okay, after 3 years in the company, I somehow felt that I have to go back to a more startup environment.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And in 2008, I did a little angel investment in a streaming company, AUPEO. At the time, a smaller consumer streaming service with a very smart
Music streaming, right?
It was music streaming, and it was it was the time of Spotify and Deezer and SoundCloud and so on, and so streaming was quite popular, and so I joined I met the founders of AUPEO and spent some angel money there, and then I joined the board, and ever since was on the board, and then in 2010 I joined AUPEO as CEO. And was back on the startup game. Yeah.
Nice. But how did it go? The switch from mapping to music streaming. Was it kind of a passion for you before listening to music, or was it more like the technical?
No, I think it was. Yeah, I think so. First of all, it was interesting. There were a lot of commonalities between what AUPEO had in mind and what we did with navigation, and so one angle was that AUPEO, as definitely the first streaming service globally, I would say, saw that streaming will not happen on smartphones or on apps, but on a variety of connected devices.
Right.
It will happen on your connected TV, on your Sonos, and so on and so forth. So from the ground up, the AUPEO platform was designed as an API. And the interface, the website, came second, right? So, and that was something that was quite familiar with what I did before, traveling through Asia, finding these hardware manufacturers and getting them at that time my navigation software, and now my streaming API. And then I remember that in 2010 we built a strategy paper where we said, okay, complexity versus potential of distribution channels, and the channel with the highest opportunity and impact, but with the highest complexity was the car, right? Because people listen to music in a car, and then it started that in 2009, AUPEO launched the first serial car with integrated streaming with Mini.
Okay.
And through Mini, then with BMW and so on. So it turned out that the major direction of AUPEO became automotive. So, and we integrated into BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Toyota, Opel, and so on and so forth. So, and that was, I would say, what drove me, and I said, okay, it's interesting, and it's anyway for me always interesting to take an idea and try to build a company out of it. So it's this company product building.
Right.
I want to go back a little bit to this part about your angel investing. You chose, like, I'm curious, around this time, 2007, 2008, how many companies did you invest in as an angel? And why did you make the decision to invest in this particular type of business at that point in time? You talked a little bit about streaming being popular, but what about the founder? What about the idea at that point in time got you excited enough to say, hey, I'm going to put some cash behind this?
It's a good question. I mean, I actually did not so many angel investments at the time, and still don't. I mean, I definitely look very much into the companies, and I try. I never just gave money away and say, okay, here, come on, take this money, and I don't care. And if you succeed, you succeeded. Not, I did it once, but that was a good friend, and he's not such a good friend anymore. So therefore, it's you should do that, right? But no. There were the very first angel investment I did was a hardware investment.
You did a hardware investment as your first angel investment. What year is this?
That was 2007, and it was the world market leader in Wi-Fi radio chips. A receiver, Cambridge, UK, Cambridge-based company, and at the time, and that was also my investment hypothesis for AUPEO. So I met the not the founder, but the major shareholder and CEO of Receiver at a dinner in Hong Kong, and I was living in Hong Kong for 2 years. And we got in touch, and somehow liked each other, and he liked my background. I liked very much what he was doing. And in 2007, there was, for a while, 2007-8, the the chance, I don't know, but there was at least the hypothesis that audio streaming radio would replace FM.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to, Sirius, all that stuff going on at the time.
Yeah. And Sirius was satellite, but it was really that you could buy these Wi-Fi radios everywhere, and they became a lifestyle design type of thing, etc. So, and these guys were a market leader in the chipsets. So the chipsets were with the Wi-Fi receiver, and there was a radio index in. So I mean, all the URLs that you could also select this streaming channel, etc. So that was my very first angel investment. And then through a guy I knew, I met the founder of AUPEO, and we just started the company maybe a year back, and said, okay, I mean, now see, if I believe that FM streaming will be replaced by FM radio by IP streaming, and the hardware will succeed, then it also needs a specializing software service. That was the reason, and I got along with the founder, and then I did it. Right? But in the early years, I also paid my money, my lessons, because I mean, it's. I sometimes was wondering if I'm a better entrepreneur or manager than an investor, right? And I was always wondering what's the reason, and I think now, almost 12, 14 years back, I would judge it differently, but. Then someone told me the problem is that if an entrepreneur is investing, and you would say an entrepreneur is always the best investor because he knows exactly what the problems are, and he knows exactly how the team should look like and what a business plan is. But the problem, and that is, I think there is a lot of truth in, is that if you look as a creative doer into business idea, and you think, oh, I could do this with that, and that with that, and you could do this sales channel, and you could that and that. You start to ignore that this company is not run by you. That you may be on the board, but you are not the one who's doing that, and all this creativity, which is right or wrong, right? And that makes you a little bit judging by the gut, which in my case. Not always, but some things just burn. Right?
Yeah, I mean, most companies fail. That's just a fact.
Still,
easy statistics. Yeah. But you managed to sell also the second company, right?
Yeah.
To Panasonic, if I'm
Panasonic, Panasonic Automotive, out of Detroit. The Michigan guys. Here we go.
Now we come back to this story. Okay, okay.
Now we get back to this story. Yeah, that was in 2012. It actually started. We sold in 2013, but I knew I mean, Panasonic is a huge company, $100 billion company. They do everything. I mean, they do lady shaves, and they do Wi-Fi antennas for airplanes and things. I mean, it's unbelievable. And if you ever travel to Japan, there's not a single thing in this country that consumes electricity that is not from Panasonic. And if you enter the country at immigration, they ask you, what are you doing? And so I'm working for Panasonic. They bow in front of you. It's a true story. So it's huge, and one part of Panasonic is one very successful part is automotive. Right, so they are tier one for a variety of technologies, lighting and so on, and they do in-car entertainment. So, and I knew the North American entity, because we worked with them with Nokia and with navigation, and there was never business, but we knew each other from conferences and so on. So, and of course, if we continue this story with IP streaming and so on, in 2007, 8, 10, 11, many of the car makers started to want to have connected services in the cars. I mean, before it was more telematic services.
Right.
If there were services, it was telematic, and now it started to become entertainment and music and so. And it, of course, had to look like an iPhone.
Yeah.
And so
that's what people were accustomed to.
Exactly. So and then we started to work with Panasonic on a POC level, proof of concept level, and we developed some cases and so on. And out of that, we developed a dynamic that at the end they acquired the company.
And was it kind of the same experience, the being acquired and the whole integration scenario to compared to Nokia?
Very different. Very different. And
was there a family hug this time around?
No, it was. I mean. Don't want to go into too many details here in public, but you simply see if a company has an experience of buying companies, right? And
right.
I mean, company like Nokia or at the time, but also today Google, etc., Oracle, these guys buying 70, 80, 100 companies. I mean, Google in 2013 bought 150 companies per year. And they buy companies of the size of 3 data scientists and say, we need you, go there. And they buy companies like Motorola for 13 billion, right? So,
right.
And then there is an attitude of how this is happening like machinery, right? And that was different in Panasonic, which is very typical, I would say, for not only a Japanese company culture, also a German company culture. German Mittelstand doesn't buy, German corporates very rarely buy. So innovation is something that you create internally, and that was differently in and that was with Panasonic. But the team who acquired us and the team from Michigan, they were enormous, and we worked very closely together. And I got a co-managing director. So the founder left pretty quickly after the exit, and so it was me.
Wait, the founder of
AUPEO
is still here as you are the CEO.
He was still in the company, yeah.
Okay, what was his role at that point in time?
He was, I mean, actually, he was the Minister of External Affairs, right? He was business development, sales. He was.
I like Minister of External Affairs. I like that. We should have that.
I mean, he lived on the plane, right?
Okay.
And that's definitely also what he liked. So and so we shared responsibilities, and but we were co-managing directors. Okay. I mean, CEOs in a German company, not a legal title. It's managing director, and so there are sometimes 2 or 3 or more. So we were 2. And no, but then another managing director from Panasonic joined, and that worked out extremely well. I mean, that was really interesting. Was especially interesting was that it was. I had overnight American parents and Japanese grandparents, right? Because Japanese corporation with headquarters in Japan, biggest market in this segment, the US, with a very powerful, self-confident North American team. Right?
Yeah, that's a lot of cultural differences.
I tell you, that's what I mean.
Navigating
I learned a lot. Yeah. Very interesting, definitely. Yeah, no, I don't want to miss that time. It was good. Yeah.
And was most of your team at this point in time, were they German or were they quite an international team?
Here?
Yeah.
In AUPEO?
AUPEO, yeah.
Oh, the week after the acquisition happened, the president, Panasonic North America, Automotive North America came here to welcome the team, and we were a small team. We were 30 people, and 35, and then we lined everyone up in a room, etc. Pre-corona, you could stand close, and then people started to introduce us. Say, "Come on, everyone!" Everyone says the 2 sentences about himself, and I think the 7th or 8th was the first German. And this guy was looking at me and said, I thought I bought a company in Germany. What's going on here, right? But that's Berlin these days, right? I mean,
was it like that, though? This is 2012, 2013, though. Was it?
13? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
2013. I mean, I would say that in 2000... So the first, retrospectively, a big change to the city came in 2006 through the Soccer World Cup, where a lot of international people discovered Berlin as, oh, wow. I mean, of course, the 90s and all the techno and all the artists, etc. But this second or third wave, it's actually the fourth probably, really happened on an international level around that time. And that meant that in 2009-10, there were a lot of international people already in the city. But it was not what it is today. I mean, if you walk, this morning I walked the dog in Hasenheide in Kreuzberg, you don't hear German anymore. I mean, you hear a lot of English and Spanish and Swedish, and I love it. I think it's great. and of course Turkish and Arabian, etc. But that's maybe more the language you would expect historically, right? But it's not anymore.
Right,
the case,
right. And you're a Berliner yourself, right?
No.
Where are you from originally?
I was born in Braunschweig, which is next to Hanover. I don't think that Braunschweiger would like that to hear that they're next to Hanover. In Braunschweig, full stop. So, no, but I was raised and in next to Frankfurt. So that's where my parents live. And then I studied in a small traditional student town in Göttingen.
Right.
And in Hamburg. And then I graduated in Hamburg and spent some time there. Then I went to Paris for a year. Then I came back to Hamburg, started my traineeship with Springer. And they sent me here for a 3 months internship. That was the plan in 1998. So originally I planned to come here for just 3 months. And I knew Berlin before, of course, and I spent a lot of time here. I have relatives here and good friends here. So in my 20s, I was very often in Berlin. And but then I discovered the city and I fell in love for the city and in the city because I met my today's wife. Yeah. So,
nice.
So I stayed. And then we spent 2 years in Hong Kong, but we came back. Yeah.
Right. So going back to that time after the second exit, I can only imagine now, doing it 2 times. Finally, it's time for a break, isn't it? And then just, relaxing and waiting for retirement, isn't it?
Yes and no. I mean, you should do a break, and I did the break. After I left Panasonic, after 2.5 years, I did really a 6-month break and traveled with my wife through Latin America, which was great time. And then took the time also to work out a new company idea and concepts. No, but I mean, I want to do something, right? And I mean, I was both exits were no unicorn exits. I mean, I wouldn't complain, right? But it's not that I now just buy yachts and go golfing.
Right.
The next one.
Yeah. Speaking of, what I found interesting when I had a look at your path was that you still remain in that kind of car ecosystem after so many years. And then my first thought was that, leading a car joint venture for 6 years, like, well, it might be sometimes really be, it consumes a lot of energy working with the car guys. I'm not meaning this in a disrespectful way, but you know what I'm talking about.
Be disrespectful. It's just us here in your living room. No one is listening.
Exactly. So I found that really interesting that after the second one, you really basically got back to the old battlefield in a way that you say, well, now it's time to...
It's a fair point. Yeah? And actually, no one asked this before, but it's a good question. It's really a good question. I mean, so first of all, somehow it happened, right? There's this red line, but I mean, when I invested into AUPEO, or when I joined AUPEO, I joined a music streaming company, and it turned out to become an automotive thing. But that happened because it was naturally somewhere on the roadmap. But of course, I also had from these early Nokia car automotive activities, I had a network, right? And so I called the network and I traveled down to Italy to the Fiat guys and say, hey, see, I have now this streaming service. I'm a startup. I mean, if you're small, you get every stage you can get and jump on it, right?
Right.
And, at least as it doesn't cost anything, right? You need to have this Minister of External Affairs. Someone has to yield and scream to the world, I'm here, right? So, and that was my automotive network, right? And then after that happened, and I learned with Panasonic also the role of a tier one. It was a decision where I said, okay, if I do it again now, right? Why not using what I built for a couple of years, 7-8 years, which is a very dense network in the automotive industry. I think quite substantial understanding how this industry is ticking, how the stakeholders working together. And in 2016, when we started, a bit before 2014, 15, it was the first time in all my startup life that automotive started to become a VC thing, right? I mean, before it was simply not a VC fundable topic because these very long production cycles and these many points of failures, etc. So then there was the hype. Fundamentally, I think fostered or initialized by the Mobileye exit in Israel, the AUPEO, and every VC in the world thought, oh wow, it's a $7 billion IPO, and we missed this opportunity, and so, and then all that happened, and then I said, okay, I mean, I looked for a short time also in other industries, but you know, if it's what you believe you can do best, why should you do something different?
Talking about your product now with German Autolabs, Chris, right? It's called. Was the core trigger to go into that direction that you figured out, as everyone who's ever driven a German car, that the whole, let's say, embedded software thingy and everything you can do with it, and of course the user experience and you mentioned the production cycles. I think they're also cruel. Everyone knows as soon as the car is on, there's a start of sales, it's already outdated. So was that the core trigger to go into that direction, or was it rather that safety aspect, or the aspect that you just it's not healthy in general at all, or it's not a good idea in general at all to use your fingers while driving, for example? What was the core motivation to get you there?
Exactly the both.
Or both.
Yeah, exactly the both. I mean, that is, of course, I was very much looking into. So at the time, this, and you know this best, this overarching scheme was developed case, right? So we had connectivity, automation, sharing, and electrification. And I looked into that, of course, right? It was the time when cruise automation was sold for $1 billion to GM, and Faraday's Future built their own car with $1 billion seed funding, and so on and so forth. And I looked into that, and then I actually got to the point where I said, okay, what's the real pain, right? And that was that I said, okay, the real pain is that people driving old cars, because it's not the fact that everyone is driving a new car, right? The majority of people are driving used cars, and all of these people actually are constantly connected to their digital life through their phones, and the phone is by far the worst form factor to be used in a car. Right, and it's very interesting that it's still allowed to put your phone on your dashboard, and that Google Maps is not blocked, and so on and so forth. And we all know that, right? Every one of us is sitting at the traffic light or at the highway. Right. So, and then I said, okay, and that brings me back to the point that you made before. So if I learned one thing in working with the automotive guys for a long time, try to be independent as long as possible when you want to work with them, and because it is something that it takes a very long time to get mature. So, and then I said, okay, wouldn't it be great to have something that in a very clear strategic focus is migrating into the automotive infrastructure, but I'm using these 6-7 years that I would need anyway to get a foot on the ground there, and building out a faster turning product, which is a consumer product, which then again can be used by all these used cars, right? Or can be integrated into those cars. So and the use case then developed out of that. I mean, the form factor that we build our own hardware and that we build a voice assistant came out of that dynamic.
Right. And for Chris, I was just wondering, you mentioned that it's actually designed to be used in old cars or in used cars, but still we are talking about an integration. Can you explain a little bit from a technical point of view how that integration looks like? For I could imagine there's so many varieties of cars. Is it a real integration, or is it more like still two worlds that are to what level is it really embedded or connected?
So. Chris, the product that we launched 2 years ago, was a very clear, pure one form factor aftermarket approach, like a TomTom navigation. Right. It's actually a kind of a lifestyle design device, and you mount it at the windshield, you connect it with your phone, and then you can turn a 14-year-old car into having the assistant with the gesture sensor and with voice interaction and say, hey, Chris, drive me to Kolonnenstraße, whatsoever.
Right.
And, and send a WhatsApp to Tom, I'm 10 minutes late, right? And then tick, you have a new WhatsApp. Do you want to hear it? Yes. And then Tom says, take your time, I'm also late, like that. So that was what we actually built and brought to the market. And but of course, there was a level of craziness. But if you build companies, you have to be a little bit naive and crazy. We built our own hardware because it was my. I was convinced actually that to bring this level of complexity, you need to control the hardware. If you go on a 250 different form factors of Android phones and try to enable anything there with 250 types of microphones, etc., you cannot be fast, etc., right? So, but what we actually did, we built our own hardware and we built our own software stack, right? So, and when we talk about integrating into cars, then I more talk about just the soul of Chris, right? The software, right? So the assistant software,
right?
And today we are at the point where we have discontinued the consumer product and the hardware, but have entered, I would say, the next natural iteration, which means that we integrate this in cars as software or on phones or on tablets, etc. I mean, what we're doing actually now, mainly, and that is a big learning over the past years. We're focusing on professional users, on professional drivers, fleet drivers, parcel delivery drivers, sales and service fleets, roadside assistants, etc. Everywhere where people are spending 8-9 hours behind a steering wheel, either because it's their job or they have to spend the time there to do their job, like a traveling sales guy. He has to go and see his customer, but he spends an hour in the car and cannot do anything. While he could prepare his meeting, he could say, okay, hey, this customer, what was my budget that I predicted from? How much did I get of that, right? What is the product he has at the moment, and so on. All of that he has in his CRM, in his Salesforce or whatsoever, right? But you cannot use it in a car unless you're using the phone again, and the phone is by far the worst form factor you can have, right?
Right.
So meaning that we take the soul of Chris. Today it's a more white label approach, or it's a white label approach, and go into this deeply integrated and embedded approach.
So that means you evolved from a pure consumer product where it was all about more like a lifestyle thingy, and then you mentioned now a few times the form factor that just also, if I understand it correctly, it just looks better inside the car, or it
looks better, it's easier to handle, etc. I mean, at the end, building hardware as a startup, it's not easy to handle.
Right.
Full stop.
Of course, yeah.
But no, it's exactly. You just bought the product. You put it in the car and off you go.
Right. And finally, you now move into a more, let's say, specialized direction, focusing on fleet customers, for example, or on special use cases, which is quite uncommon, I would say, but I found it interesting.
Why is it uncommon?
Because my initial thought was, of course, you're continuing that path. You're starting B2C with a consumer product, and you just, of course, the final goal is to integrate it directly into the car as it is, as a very generic device. And probably as this was too easy, or as it was hard to explain, I could just imagine you go on more specialized use cases. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes and no. I mean. So first of all, with the consumer product, we learned, as said, that many of the customers, many of the users were professional drivers. So we will listen to them. Then there were.
That happened by coincidence, or was
Uber driver from Las Vegas drops you an email and say, "I need my Uber app in your device." He did this with Kickstarter. He had the device, but we didn't integrate the Uber app, of course. I talked to the Uber head of business development, but he said, we have different priorities at the moment, if you can imagine. Like that, right? Or whatever, delivery drivers and so on. Then the largest bus OEM in the world, travel bus OEM, approached us and say, hey, we have this problem with our bus drivers that they spend 8 hours behind a wheel. And there are two challenges. First of all, they have a private life. Sometimes kids coming from school and they send a WhatsApp. He would like to reply, but it doesn't really make sense if a school bus driver is writing a WhatsApp while driving a bus, etc. So is this something on a pilot level, right? And the other thing is we have this great cloud-based telematics infrastructure where the bus is sending 250 signals per minute to the infrastructure. But again, the driver needs to use the phone to retrieve that information.
Right.
So we built a digital assistant for bus drivers. And what we learned with this, and also with the experience with the consumer product, is that it's actually using a voice assistant can be fun, but it's way more helpful if you really have a use case where it is an assistant, right?
Right.
Asking an assistant, hey, Alexa, I don't know, what was Lady Di's mother-in-law maiden name?
That was Alexa.
That was Alexa.
Yeah.
Great. So, hi. And so that's fun. But if you have a direct use case where you say, okay, what I have to do now and what is my next stop and so on, then it makes a lot of sense,
right.
Because people get distracted while driving and so on. So and that is something that we just listen to, and that is what you do as a startup. You adopt to what you learn along the way, right? But the other point is that when I started the company, I built out 3 phases for development, right? And I said, first we start with the consumer product in B2C. Then this will migrate after 2 to 3 years into aftermarket consumer. That was the first phase. Aftermarket B2B, that's the second one, and that is fleets, right? And the third one is then to integrate the software directly in the cars.
Right.
So somehow it was from a very beginning something that we had in mind, and we felt that is the right way to do. It's just that the market taught us do it faster than we originally thought. Yeah.
Right. I want to dig deeper into how the whole technology will evolve in the future, because what I notice is that you always use the connotation of AI for your promotion. That means it's not only about the core functionality of voice recognition, because what we already learned is that something you're licensing. It's not only the core functionality of triggering any kind of event with the voice recognition. That's the second layer probably. There must be more as you use the term of artificial intelligence. So where is this whole thing going?
It's this intelligent element of really becoming an assistant rather than a voice interface, right?
Right.
One thing is that I replace a button with a command, right? And say, okay, turn temperature on 25, right? That is a command-driven voice interface, replaces. The other thing is that there's a proactive voice and say, it's getting under 10 degrees outside. Should I turn the temperature on 25 degrees? Because I realize that's the most comfortable temperature that you picked over the past 10 drives. So, and that as an example, that's what you have, for example, just comes to my mind what you have with Nest, right? That you have a device that is learning your behavior when you're at home, when you're not at home, and then it builds this service attitude or profile.
Right.
So, and that's also what we do. Right? And of course, I mean, I'm with you. AI is a common term, and it's a buzz term. It's a little bit overbuzzed. Meanwhile, and and that's what we all know. And of course, we do not do true AI. I mean, it's machine learning. It's rule based. Something where we're training on an individual level. On the other side, the voice. The voice technology is one subject of AI science. So,
Right.
I think it was very fitting. He actually did not use the word AI in your description when you're talking about the tech stuff. You use natural language understanding and natural language processing, which I think is a really good way of sort of positioning that within this larger space of artificial intelligence. Yeah. I kind of want to jump back to your personal life because I just think, first of all, you're cool. And I'm like, how do I live the life like you? You should put your sunglasses on. We have to have that moment. So you've done so much stuff in your life and you have navigated through all of these kinds of different spaces. And I know it's easy to sort of, when you look back, you can paint the story and say, oh, it was that, and this connection. But I'm wondering, if you could look back at yourself at that moment in 1999 and you sort of look forward now, what were your guiding principles that kind of kept you able to withstand these roller coaster rides and sort of move between, a life in a corporate setting and life in a startup and then back and forth and, different parts of the world, different people, what kind of principles do you live by that allow you to do that?
So first of all, thank you. Wonderful compliment. Thank you. But it also tells you that I'm pretty old, and me too. I just turned 50. I mean, it's something that is completely insane. If I think about that, the story that I started to tell you were actually starting when I was in my late 20s. But that's what's happening if you're doing stuff for a while. No, I mean. I think everyone has his own recipe or has his own rules for that. But I think one thing that is extremely substantial for me is a mixture of a very stable relationship and family that keeps you balanced also in very difficult times. And I can tell you, if you're running startups, not only if you're running startups, also other people have difficult situations, but you have a lot of sleepless nights. And if you then have a partner who says, hey, you will get through this and you will get it over, you will find a way, you will find a solution, etc. And you know what? If it doesn't work out whatsoever, I mean, we will have a glass of champagne and then life will goes on. That helps a lot, of course, right? Because it's something that it's very important. The other thing is that I built out a couple of principles for me over the years where I say, okay, I really try not to work on weekends. I mean, my wife would say differently. I think I almost don't work on the weekends. No, but there are these guys who running to the office also on Sundays and so on. And I really try to spend these 2 days with my wife and somewhere in nature in the countryside with a new dog now and so on and so forth. So really try to balance. And what keeps me running is a mixture of excitement, naivety. It's something that also is a vanity, of course. I mean, it's something. If you're a stage guy, you need a stage. Thanks for the camera. And let's see how long I still do that. And and I have this it's an attitude that has a good and a bad side, as many skills probably have. But I have a very patient way of going to stand things. And periods and 9/11, and I mean, I remember 2001, 2002, 2003, 2.5 years. There were really. We were 10 guys in the office. We were 40 before we downsized the company, and somehow we moved, but there was no big excitement. I mean, there was no success, and that is something that, of course, if you more into the alpha animal type of success direction, and I was I did decathlon when I was younger, so it's this: you want to win, you want to run, and so on. And if this is not coming, but somehow I learned to stand this. But on the other side, I'm completely impatient when I work in corporates if things don't move, right? And that is what always brought me back to the startup, and that I said, okay, come on. I spent now 1 year on the same topic. I spent these enormous budgets that corporates spend for stupid things, and say, okay, I have 40 people here in the room, and we had this agreement 6 months ago that we do this decision and nothing has happened. Come on. I go and do my own company and take the risk again to fail.
That brings me to a question, because of course we're as strategy advisors and venture builders. We're working on both ends, right? We're dealing a lot with car manufacturers and tier ones, but at the same time we want to help founders to be successful and ramp up their companies, and share a little bit of our experience, in particular on that very special automotive domain. Is there any kind of advice you can give for young founders that really want to make it in automotive? Because, I guess you have to learn it the hard way. I definitely had to learn it the hard way, but finally we're still here. So
looking good,
looking fresh.
Also cool.
9 p.m.
Yeah.
So
after a long day, long week. Yeah.
Anything you can share?
I mean, I have this set of golden rules that I usually tell young founders, and some of them I had the pleasure to mentor and to work with. I mean, there are some rules unrelated to automotive and some related to automotive. No, but I think the first rule is definitely it takes longer than you think. Right? I mean, it's always this thing people read on TechCrunch, they see from outside. I talked to many people over the past years from industry, enterprise background, and they think, oh, I have this great idea, I have to do a startup, because they all think it's something like a sprint, right? You raise your first seed money, and that is of course $1 million, and then you have immediately your first customer because I have this great network, and then I sell the company after 4 years for a 3-digit $1 million price. So, and that's not reality. It can happen, and it happens, right? But that is 1 or 2 out of probably 10,000 or 1 million, right?
Right.
And that means, so if you start to build a company, it can take you years, and it doesn't mean that you are therefore a bad entrepreneur. It just, especially if you try this in industrials like automotive, it takes a time. And I mean, I always recommend, that is not one of the rules, but I recommend to watch the Gartner hype cycle, right? There is their hype, and there is the valley of disillusion, right? And then there is this period of recurrence and market maturity and so on and so forth. And some technologies just need 30 years, right? So that is something, okay, take your time. I think the second thing is that it's, if you work with in automotive or with automotive players, tier ones or OEMs, it looks these days very differently than it looked 5-6 years back. Many of these companies are very approachable for startups. They have the programs, the startup Autobahn. There is the BMW Garage, which was, I would say, the poster boy of all startup programs in OEMs, and they have technology scouts. So it's something. There are the events. Ford is doing that. Conti is doing that, etc. So that is it's easy to approach, right? There's Hyundai Cradle. I mean, really many of them. But still, and that is something that you must not get wrong. It takes enormously long because of this very special nature of the product before you really can say, I have a deal, right? I mean, a POC is something very common in this industry, and until a couple of months ago, there were good budgets for that, and they also will come back, but at the moment, most of them are frozen. It's a complex product and a complex industry, right? So, and I had these founders sitting in front of me and say, "What do we do wrong?" I mean, we called them twice. We had this very good meeting. They replied to my emails. Is it? I mean, are we stupid? I don't know. I mean, it's the way it is. And then, with all respect, I have a lot of people I admire in the industry. I have a lot of friends in the industry. But of course, like in many other industries, but also in automotive, you still have people who don't get it. I mean, who treat you in a way they shouldn't treat you. There is a level of arrogance sometimes in engineering and automotive that is disrespectful,
right,
from time to time. It happened to me. It happened to others. Where you think, but that's more a natural thing, right? People think because they have a German luxury brand logo on their payslip, but they never took risk in their life, that they can tell you,
they made it.
I don't know what you're doing here. What do you special? I mean, this is something we can do ourselves, and so on and so forth, right?
But isn't that such an interesting psychological observation? I found it really, really interesting because where is this coming from? Of course, it's an interesting product. It's an emotional product. It's sexy, but to directly use it as some kind of a pure life identifier for you to then being arrogant. I think,
as I said, I think it's a very human, natural behavior, right? I mean, people behave strange in student times because they're in a certain fraternity, or they behave because they belong to a certain college or in a certain golf club, etc. People believe because they belong to an artificial type of thing,
a social group, actually.
Social group or a corporate or whatever, that it makes them special, right? And it just, there are uneducated, stupid people who think that
we can cut that out.
I think so.
No, I think we should leave it at that.
Yeah, but I think it's really interesting. Between the three of us.
Scroll.
But I do think it's interesting because, you might think that, but probably that's naive, right? You might think that the self-confidence comes with some kind of accomplishment, right?
Yeah.
So if you're the quarterback at least, or if you're, if you're the top scorer in a soccer club, okay, that's a certain accomplishment. But for some of the corporate buddies, it's
but as I said, it's not just the automotive industry.
Of course not.
To make this very clear. I think it's something that is very natural. I told you the example of Nokia and Mercedes,
right.
And that's a story I only heard. There's also no proof for this story, but that's what it is.
One of my favorite sort of things that fits into the space, and it's completely unrelated, but I think it just sort of illustrates what you're saying, that is human nature. My favorite Planet Money episode, which is an NPR podcast, is this episode about the Birkin bag. And it starts with this woman telling a story about how she was run off of a New York sidewalk because a woman was carrying this bag, and she didn't think like, oh, what the hell? Like, why did this lady do this? She said to herself after it happened to her, I need to get one of those. And it's just that exact same moment. It's like you want to belong to something. You want to feel like this. If it gives you a sense of power, a sense of strength, you want to have it. And I think anytime you can cloak yourself in that, people will do whatever they can to hold on to it. So I don't think it's automotive. It's just human.
Yeah, exactly. And it's triggered by the fact, I mean, there's so much love for these car brands, and people feel that.
Guys, I do appreciate that you're really, really nice to the automotive guys, but we are now talking about an industry that's getting closer and closer to the cliff, and everyone knows, right? We are all talking about that every day in our lives, in our professional lives. So it's the days are over, and I would really advocate for a certain level of humbleness, because also if you read the stories about Daimler and Benz and how many pivots they had and how much time it took them to become successful, actually that was one of your advices, right? That it takes time. I would really advocate for a little bit more humbleness.
But who are you speaking about within these organizations? Are you talking about C-suite, or are you talking about middle managers?
Middle managers in the first place.
Yeah, I agree.
Middle managers in the first.
I mean,
C-suite normally it's easy. Those are easy conversations in most cases, right? But yeah.
No, absolutely. And C-suite, I mean, you have you don't have anyone in a C-suite who does not acknowledge what you just said, right? I mean, we're running towards a cliff, and of course, there was for many years a different generation, but today's C-suite, I mean, everyone got it. It's the middle management. It's this, oh, I'm 42 years old now, I want to spend another 20 years, and I want to have a bigger company car, I want to have 3 more windows in my office, and I want this extra day of holidays because it makes me part of the leading circle.
Guys, I have one last question, and it's a little bit about the future. So we discussed what Chris can do for the driver of a car. We discussed where it's going to go, looking at special use cases like for fleet drives and so on. But I would be very curious on what might be the role of such a device in an autonomous scenario where there is no driver anymore inside the car, because I think there are now two kind of competing theories that the whole kind of intelligence and interaction that's needed to do stuff, whatever it is, like if I want to watch a movie, or if I want to work or anything, that this should be put inside the car, or people saying, well, it's exactly the opposite. So we need to separate it, and we are already doing it because we are all carrying our smartphones and notebooks and so on. So looking at Chris, what might be kind of the optimal role? Looking maybe. Yeah, well, we might argue about if it's 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years into the future. But thinking about the scenario, level 5, no more drivers needed, but still Chris inside the car. What's the functionality?
I think it's an excellent. You said last question whatsoever, but it's an excellent topic because we will have some time to talk about this now. So, first of all, I think the second. Most popular question I had to answer to investors and journalists, etc., over the past 4 years is, why do you build Chris if we anyhow all drive autonomous in a couple of years, and then we can use our phones because, I mean, the cars are driving. So, okay, that's a very smart question. If we have 480 million cars older than 10 years on on European and North American roads, it will take maybe 10, 15 years or 20 years or 30 years to replace that. And that's a time where you can earn a lot of money as a company. And if I didn't find a solution for that over those 20 years, what I then do with the hardware, I did something wrong in the first 20 years, or I'm a rich guy and I would not care anymore. So the other point is that I said,
that was the honest answer.
That was the honest.
The honest part of the answer.
Absolutely. The other part was that I said, okay, if you don't believe that an autonomous driving car even requires more a virtual assistant than a non-autonomous driving, then you never should call yourself a Star Trek fan, right? Because what is Jean-Luc Picard doing? He's flying a pretty autonomous flying ship, right? I mean, this thing, hyperspace, speed, blah, 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 right? Nothing. And what he's doing is say, computer, switch on the shields. Computer, where is Lieutenant Uhura? Computer. So in Star Trek Enterprise, in a complete autonomous computerized environment, the major interface is a smart entity. It's a smart computer entity with a voice. Odyssey 2001 as well, right? But that's a little weirdo. So let's go back to Star Trek, right? And that's something that I strongly believe. I think no matter if I'm in a shared vehicle, or like in a bus, or if I'm in an individual car, if I'm not driving anymore, right? Of course I can touch and interact, etc. And by the way, it doesn't matter if it's on your phone or it's a question of comfort. It's a user experience thing. It might be interesting that you have really an animated window where things are being shown and then you read. I mean, like a secondary. That's something. I mean, the car makers have to figure out how they finally get a step into the service world. But it's not a hardware question, right? It's a service software question. But I need an interface to communicate with this car, right? And I want to stop, or I have emergency, or I have an accident. I mean, of course, I know there are hypotheses that you can avoid accidents for 99.9%, but still you will have a breakdown. And what is that then? I mean, the car should ask, hey, how are you, right? Are you okay? Are you, what condition are you? Because you might gonna have a remote emergency or remote trucks or something like that. So, no, I think talking about Chris, that is just the beginning, right? And it's now about training this type of individual assistance, and talking about will it be in the car or off the car? It will be there, right? No matter if it's on your phone or not. The question is really who owns the customer touch point and who runs the service. And talking about running towards a cliff doesn't look too good for the automotive guys at the moment.
I think I like this as the last sentence for today. So, Holger, it was a real pleasure.
Really was.
Awesome
Thanks
to talk to you.
Me. Yeah,
Thanks
beautiful.
for being here.
Thanks
and
for the late hour. Now it's really dark here.
Yeah, let's definitely repeat that next time during the day and see where you're going with Chris. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks. Bye.